admired this brother from a distance, and I am so happy to have him on the No Covers talk show today. I have when it come to Brother Barber, he one of them. I study a lot of ministers, but this brother I admire you because you've been on the ground running.
God bless you, brother.
And I've been with some ministers. I come from a background of ministers and been with some ministers and ran with some ministers. But what I've always admired about you, he's running. He's old. He old school. He go to the ground. He knock on the doors. Miss you when you left North Carolina for a minute, but we miss you. We miss you. But it's so wonderful to have you here. I know you got a lot to tell us, and the floor is yours right now. I know you want us to understand the message today. I know the message is get out and take care of business, so we got to take care of business.
Well, Brother, I would first of all thank you, thank this station, and thank Brother Kojo who set it up for us to be here today. I've got Miss Yara Allen, who you just had singing at the Riverside Church.
Oh.
That's the church that Dr. King preached his sermon about the time to break silence, and she was standing in the same spot that Dr. King spoke, and I had just preached. I also have a sister here who's filming, my Dara, who actually filmed Nelson Mandela and others from South Africa, and she's in here doing some filming today. So we just filled up the studio.
Take it. Come on in.
But brother, I've been traveling. I left so much North Carolina, but we moved to this Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. And this spring, we had 41 states to join in 6 weeks of nonviolent civil disobedience. Over 5,000 people did it from Mother's Day to the June 21st. 50-some thousand people attended those events at state capitals, sounding the alarm about what's going on in this country, not just what's going on with Trump, what's going on in this country. We also looked at, we had 38 million people hit us up on Twitter and 3 million people watched us on video. And what we're saying is, first of all, I love vote because your life depends on it. Right now in America, I want to give your audience, because your audience is very conscious of some numbers. There are 140 million people in this country that are poor and low wealth. Like black and white, Asian, and that's 140 million people. That's 43.5% of this country. There are 37 million people without health insurance. We're the only nation in the world, the richest nations of the world, that does not offer some form of free health care, where politicians get free health care when they go to Congress from our money, but then block us from getting the same thing they get. We got 4 million families in this nation, Doc, that wake up every morning, they can buy unleaded gas, can't buy unleaded water. We got a situation where the CEOs of defense companies make an average of $19 million a year. The average combat soldier makes less than 30. And some of them come back home and have to get food stamps. You just can't have a democracy like that. And then we got this strange religious nationalism. You talk about preachers. Well, just the other day there was a billboard in St. Louis that said, "The Word made flesh," and had a picture of Trump. The Word made flesh, a picture of Trump. And Bobby Bowden down in Florida, I was in Florida, I've been in Florida, Mississippi, Kentucky. The other day, Bobby Bowden was on the stage, and the crowd said, "Trump plus God is a majority." Now, that ain't had nothing to do with Republican, Democrat. I'm just talking about straight up blasphemy, straight up, heresy. And so what I'm saying to folks is not partisan. Look at the alarm. And if everything I just named, voting impacts. Now, I'm not one to say that voting is all you have to do. I think you have to build a movement and vote. You can't vote and then go home. You got to stay active. But the reality is, right here in this state, y'all just got hit by a hurricane. We did. You have upwards of 1 million people in this state that don't have health insurance. A lot of them are people that just got hit by the storm. We have a legislature right now that if they in 10 minutes they could vote and 500,000 people would have health care. They refuse to do it. We got 4.7 million people in this state that are poor, right? In this state. The majority of them are white women, children, and the disabled. In this state. we have, we have coal ash and other chemicals being dumped in our water. And who politicians who sit in Raleigh, who in our counties, they control the regulation. So your life depends on it. So what I'm going all around the state, particularly in the East today, is say, look, for a moment, forget, how the president or just even party. If you are want full free right to vote, if you want health insurance, if you want living wages, if you want the air and the water taken care of, then you have to understand. I'm a prayer. I'm Pentecostal too, Doc. I pray in tongues, so I know prayer. But you got to do more than pray. That's what God told Moses. You can't just pray for the sea to open. You got to use your rod. So I'm saying if we ever needed to vote, we sure do need to vote now. We need to build a movement now. We need to vote now. And we need to vote our values. So if you're for health care and a party is against it, I'm not even saying which, I don't care. If they're not against it, if they're against it, vote against them. If they're for it, vote for them. Vote for your life, for your children's life, right? And don't sit home. Now here's the other thing. Yes, people are suppressing the vote, and that's wrong, and we ought to fight that. And we did in this state. We fought. We had 1,000 people go to jail so that people could have same-day registration, early vote. I've been to jail 14 times. I'm not bragging. I mean, I'm proud of them, the reason I went. But my point is that you don't sit home after you win. We won.
Right.
We beat them in the courts. So the last thing you want to do is win those victories and then sit home. And the last thing I say is, and we can talk, 100 million people didn't vote in the last election. This is not partisan. This is just a fact. Trump won by 77,000 votes in 3 states. That's how he got the electoral college. 2.6 million people didn't vote in North Carolina. 500,000 of black people did not vote in the last election. You cannot stay home like that. We have elections in this state that were decided by 100 votes, 100,000 votes, and 2 million people sat home.
And that's what I want to speak to as far as the base that I have, the base that I work with, has primarily from No Covers has always been kind of like a pseudo militant brand.
Yeah,
that's who I am.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's where I come from. I worked studied at the Minister Fire County for years.
That's right.
So now what happens? How do you speak to? Because I've been getting beat up. I myself don't even call Uncle Tom.
That's right.
And I didn't start talking about voting and getting out to vote and vote for your life. And I've always voted. I've always voted. I came from the Conservative Party. Came from that and came back over. Now I'm liberal.
Sure.
So now, what do I say to my followers or my folks that say, hey, it don't count? It doesn't count. The vote don't count. Because I'm kind of smashing to say, my philosophy with them is, if we're not in the fight, we can't win either way. If we're just gonna sit at home and complain, we can't win. So what we say to that young, it's a young majority.
That's right.
Because I think last election, that's that majority that stayed home because they came out with Obama.
Right.
But then when it came to the next election, I know a lot of those brothers that I talked to told me they didn't go. And I'm fighting them to say, go man, anyway.
That's right.
How do we get them out?
Well, first of all, they need to do the research and realize that, in this study about these bots and these folks that were playing on the internet, a lot of those were bots telling folk not to vote on the internet. It wasn't us. It was hacked. People hacking the system. We don't know yet the depth of that.
Right.
Secondly, in our state, for instance, to your young audience, the folk, many of them work and they pay taxes. Well, I just want you to know the people in this state that fought to suppress the vote, tried to stop early voting, tried to keep 16, 17-year-olds from pre-registration, they used your tax dollars that you pay every day against you. They spent $6 million of your tax dollars. So they were spending your money to keep you from voting. If you militant, you ought to be militant about that, because the average black person, you don't mess with their mama or their money.
Right.
That's another point. They messing with your mama. When people don't vote, remember your mama, your grandmama, and all of them, they died, they fought, they bled for the right to vote. And I know you're not gonna say that your mama and your grandmama and them weren't militant, because they were better than you.
Right.
Now, I might make somebody say,
no, go say it.
But I'm gonna say the truth, Doc.
This is No Covers. We call it No Covers.
Because a lot of folks be talking about how bad they were. you know, you don't walk down the street and if you look at somebody in their eyes, they're gonna hang you. That's what your mama and your grandmama and daddy did. They had to face the Klan and knew if somebody shot them, they couldn't even march in the street, let alone go to the courts. So if you want to talk about who was tough, you know, if the people who ran out of slavery, you know, the people who stood up against forces in the past, they were tough. We are now living off of their sacrifice. So, you know, if I'm militant in the sense of being determined to fight, right? And I'm not going to let people take from me. In South Africa, what did they fight for? The vote. Here in America, they fought for the vote. You think Frederick Douglass wasn't militant? You think Harriet Tubman wasn't militant? You think Dr. King, you know, wasn't militant? Some people read the first part of Malcolm's life, but they don't read the end of Malcolm's life. You got to read the whole story. You got to read the whole story, right? We don't know where Malcolm would have ended up because they shot him because they were afraid of him and Dr. King and Cesar Chavez and even people like Rabbi Heschel coming together, right? So the point I'm saying to folk is, look, yeah, if you don't vote, it doesn't count. It doesn't count to your benefit, but it sure will count to your disadvantage, right? It will count to your disadvantage. And if you fussing and mad about what's happening now I agree with your audience on this, and I will be honest with you. I'm the first to say voting is not enough. I will also say voting is not the most important thing. Now what I mean by that is, people had to build movements before they won the right to vote. In order to get the right to vote, they had to build a movement. So movement building is important. So I'm saying, I'm not trying to get people just to vote. I'm trying to get them to register for the movement and vote. So they can sign up to the Poor People's Campaign, go to www.breachrepairs.org, repairs the breach, sign up for the Poor People's Campaign, because Wednesday, we still gonna be in the street.
Yeah, talk about that, because that's what I talked about yesterday.
Right.
Yesterday I said, I want our people especially, no matter what happens today, we can keep going.
Oh yes, sir.
We can't go on crying and mad and boo-hooing like we did about 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever happens, we got to keep moving. So talk about that campaign and how people can get involved, because we got to keep moving.
The first thing that we got to understand is we have to stop voting for personalities and vote for principle. That's what happened when President Obama ran. Everybody came out, President Obama, black president,
right.
Blah, blah, blah. And then as soon as he got elected, they went home, and then 2 years later, the implosion, and he didn't even have a Congress to work with anymore. So we can't do that. So we're with the Poor People's Campaign right now, a national call for a moral revival. And the Poor People's Campaign is organizing people, black, white, red, brown, yellow, every different race, color, creed, and sexuality across this country, who are wanting to fight against 5 things, and I'll name them. So if these 5 things bother you, come join us. But now you got to be willing to work in fusion with other people. Number 1, we're fighting systemic racism. And we talk about systemic racism, we're not just talking about somebody that calls you the N-word. We're talking about systemic racism like voter suppression or mass incarceration or situations like we see at the border when brown children are being snatched. We're talking about policies that when those policies are passed, they hurt the black community. But we're also talking about poverty, systemic poverty. There's 62 million people, brother, that make less than a living wage every day in this country, work hard, have to live in their cars. 54% of all African Americans make less than a living wage. 66% of African Americans are poor and low wealth. 38% of whites are poor and low wealth. Now, interestingly, but in raw numbers, there are more whites that are poor than there are black. So we're hooking people up from the Delta of Mississippi to the mountains of Kentucky, white and black, who are coming together to fight against racism and economic inequality. We are taking on the fact, as I said to you, about health care, and the fact that it's an immoral shame that we have 37 million people in this country, the richest country in the world, that do not have health care. We're taking on ecological devastation because the most people hurt by the pollution of the water, the air, and the water, the air, and the land are poor people, white people, poor black people. And we're taking on the military empire and militarism and all of this money. You know, the majority of the people that die now in the military are people that commit suicide, not people that, and you know this. And since I think World War II, all the countries we've attacked have been black and brown, right? So we're taking it on, and we're taking it on with people, with impacted people of every different race, color, creed, all different religions, even people that don't have a faith, but they believe in the moral, arc of the universe. And we're taking on this Christian nationalism, this nationalism that it's like fascism, neo-fascism, and even religious nationalism that says, look, all you gotta do to please God is be against gay people, for prayer in the school, for gun rights, for tax cuts, and for a certain party, and that means that you're on God's side. We're like, It says clearly, the majority of the scriptures in the Bible have to deal with how you treat the poor. If you cut all the scriptures out that speak to how you treat the poor, how you treat the widow, how you treat strangers, the Bible falls apart. So all these people talking about, that they got a word from the Lord, but they don't ever say anything about the poor, the brokenhearted, the blind, the stranger, the sick. That's not the essence. That's not the essential of Scripture. So the campaign, Doc, is taking it up. We got coordinating committees in 41 counties, 41 states. We're engaged in massive civil disobedience. We're engaged in canvassing now in poor communities. We're doing hearings. We're planning for major poor people's conference. And in 220, a major gathering of poor and impacted people across the country and in some other parts of the world to say, we are not going to stand for a politics where the only thing the politicians talk about are the middle class, or we get drawn into mess about tweets and who touched who and that kind of thing, and we don't deal with the real issues of our time: systemic racism, systemic poverty, ecological devastation, the war economy, and the false moral narrative.
Sometimes if you don't know where you came from, you don't know how you got here. You don't know where you're going. You don't know how you got. How did we do it? How did we get in this mess?
Well, Doc,
from your opinion, how did we get into this mess that we in?
Yeah. The worst thing you can do right now in what we're dealing with is to say it's just a president, because you miss that we are suffering from the seeds that have been sown. Now, I could say from the beginning of America, but let me shorten it a little bit.
Come on.
In 1968, as Dr. King was murdered, others were murdered. Malcolm had been murdered in 65. A lot of folks. The movement was being shot down, and a new movement was being brought up, and that movement was called the Southern Strategy. It was used by Kevin Phillips, who wrote it up, and Richard Nixon used it, right? And the goal of that movement was to find a way, particularly in the South, to split poor black people and poor white people from working with each other, because they created a potential political base that could transform politics for years to come. And the goal was to not sound racist, but to implement policies in a way that pit black and brown people against one another. The current president that we have, and I can talk about him since he's not on the ballot per se, the current president that we have, he played to an audience that had been cultivated for 50 years by people like Jesse Helms and Strom Thurmond. This audience that's cheering him, it's been cultivated, right? It was planned. It was a strategy. And Ronald Reagan used it. Bush used it. A lot of folks used it. He's just using it to the nth degree. And so what that strategy is one of degrading people. And when he came down that escalator and went right after Mexicans, he was throwing out what we call code word or dog whistles. Now, you know about a dog whistle, if you ain't the dog, you can't hear it. So you have to be a dog, or you have to know what the dog whistle sounds like in order to hear it. So the folk that started barking, they knew what they were hearing. To us, it just sounded like this new guy just coming along. No. He's been seeding this, right? And so when you add that strategy that's been used for 50 years, and it created what's called the solid South. Now, Trump, for instance, got elected. He's the only one of, there are only 3 presidents in the history of this country that I know of that were elected president without winning the popular vote. Rutherford B. Hayes in 1877, and that turned out bad. because he gave the South back over to the former slave masters and took all the troops out, and that ended basically Reconstruction. Bush, George W. Bush, we went into Iraq and Afghanistan, places we shouldn't have been in. We spent $9 billion in Afghanistan, a war we can't win. Should have never gone there. And Trump, right? He won by the Electoral College. Most people don't know that from Maryland to Texas is over 170 Electoral College votes, which means if you can control the minds of the people in the 13 former slave states, you can win over 170 electoral votes. You don't need but 99 from the other 37 states to win. He did that, as many others have. And he gets in, he lost by 4.5 million votes. He won by 77,000 votes in 3 states. In Wisconsin, he got the electoral colleges out of Wisconsin. 250,000 votes were suppressed. He won by 30,000 votes. In Michigan, he won Michigan's electoral college by 10,000 votes. 100,000 black folk didn't even vote in Detroit. In North Carolina, he won by 170,000 votes. 2.5 million people in North Carolina didn't even vote. 500,000 black people. That's how we got where we are. The strategy and the apathy connected together, taking him for a joke, right? And then he gets in, and what does he do? He runs that playbook that's been out there for 50 years. And that playbook said we have to take over the Supreme Court. We have to cut all the monies to the government, give the money away to the greedy wealthy so that the government can't, quote unquote, fund entitlement programs. But they first had to convince a lot of people that entitlement programs, Social Security, Medicaid, were going to folk that look like you and me, when in fact it's benefiting everybody. The goal was to get people to vote against their own interests. So so Nell Painter in Princeton says it like this. She's an author. She says, no Obama, no Trump. She says Trump is the iconography of a too often repeated scenario in the American project. We take a step forward, and then there's this massive backlash to go backwards. I like to say it like this. Trump is the symptom. You know what? You know, like a cold. When you sneeze, that ain't the cold.
Right.
And what comes out your nose ain't the cold. It's the symptom. You don't treat what comes out your nose. You treat what's inside your body. Right? You wipe what's on your nose, but you treat what's inside your body. And so what we've got to do, we've had this problem, and you can trace it all through American history, but I'm just going from 68 now. What's been in the body politic, this stuff is planned. You know, now again, he's doing it to the nth degree. People forget when Ronald Reagan ran for president, what's the first place he went? Philadelphia, Mississippi, where Schwanner Training Goodman killed, and gave the signal that he was, quote unquote, for a basic, racist way of doing politics. But he didn't say it as abruptly as a Trump. So, and I could trace it, further than that. But what we need to understand is this is by design. And that's why when it came to something like Kavanaugh's appointment, those folk pushed through. They didn't get, because it's been the playbook. They don't want 6 members of the Supreme Court, 5. They want 6 or 7 members, right? This is what's going on. They've been against Brown versus Board of Education since it was passed. They don't want to have living wages. They want to keep the wages low. Because if you have living wages, so many of the people in minority communities will benefit. They didn't want people to know that the Affordable Care Act helped more white people than black people. They didn't want that, because then black people and white people would say, well, look at what happened when a black president, came into existence. Look what happened. They didn't want to see that, brother, because then people would start working together, organizing together, mobilizing together, and voting together. And the day that black poor people and white poor people and labor and brown people learn how to form an agenda for progress together in this country, they can ultimately shift this country. The greatest fear has always been black and white and brown and Asian people of poverty and low wealth coming together and forming an agenda together. sends tremors through the extremist body and the oligarchs who want to control the country.
So if we know the playbook, how do we deal with the electoral college? Is it possible
Well,
to get rid of it?
Well, it may be. I don't think in the short term, because see, the other thing you got to understand is there's a book, and your audience ought to read it, called Democracy in Chains by Nancy McLean. She got inside of this stuff, and she found out actually that one of the things that the extremists want is they want a constitutional convention, because they have a whole lot of amendments that they want to go after, right? Right now, what is Trump talking about? The 14th Amendment.
Right.
Now, in the Constitution, the two most important constitutional amendments to me are the First Amendment, the right to freedom of religion, freedom of protest, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and the 14th Amendment, equal protection under the law. And the 14th Amendment is in the middle. Now, somebody said, but Reverend Brown, the 13th Amendment ends slavery. If you end slavery, but you don't have equal protection under the law, you can be taken right back into slavery. If you have the women have the right to vote, but you don't have equal protection under the law, another group can come along and undermine that. Every progressive thing we have fought for is rooted in equal protection under the law. That you get all you have to do is be born or naturalized in these United States, right? So, well, I don't know if we want a constitutional amendment just yet. But how do you beat it? Number one, you can't let elections go to the Electoral College. And that means you can't stay home. Because every time you don't vote, you create the possibility of having the Electoral College decide. And every time that has happened in history, it's been bad for us. It's been bad for poor folks. That's just the truth. So you can't allow that. Secondly, you got to stay engaged. You can't just vote for people. We have to run, and we have to build these fusion coalitions. Now, let me tell you something. I've been in rooms, the people may not, since I've left North Carolina, but we did it here in North Carolina too. I was in a room one day in Eastern it's a place called Harlan, Kentucky, Harlan County, USA. They told me not to go up there. They said the folk is 99% white, 89% or so voted for Trump. This up here in the hills, the Hatfields and McCoys are up here. You don't want to go up there, especially this is a black man. And I said, well, I'm like, I got some Indian in me and white in me and black. I'm going. I took my team up there. We organized. About 500 people showed up, all white for the most part. They told me nobody ever comes up here and sees us. They said some people around here voted for Trump, but there are a whole lot of us that don't agree with that. We started talking about racism and how the very people in that state who use racist voter suppression, the white legislators, when they get elected, they pass laws that hurt mostly the white people in Eastern Kentucky. We brought black folk from Louisville. So now you got white folk in Eastern Kentucky from the mountain organizing with inner city black folk from Louisville, connected with black mamas from the Delta of Mississippi. Doc, when you start getting that together, you see, we went to Arizona and went out on the Apache reservation. Most people don't even know what the native people are facing still today in this country, right? They can't even own their own homes. They are now hooked up with black folk in the city of Arizona, right? We're trying to build this massive coalition of people of conscience connected to an agenda. And Malcolm talked about this when he came back from Mecca. Martin was talking about this with the Poor People's Campaign.
We talked about it together.
And and that's why, brother,
we know
they not here.
We know
because they were
working it.
And some of their own people didn't want to do it.
Right.
But Malcolm and Martin had come to understand if you want to win,
you got to do it together.
You got to do it together, and you got to find people of conscience, and you're going to find people of conscience in all color, shapes, and sizes.
There was a time his wife was upset. McKean was upset with his wife
Exactly.
for going down there and getting off Malcolm. But she understood.
She understood.
His mind had changed.
Exactly.
And he was beginning to think differently and act differently and behave differently and it become a union.
Right.
And that's what we got to do today.
It's radicalness against.
I got to ask you this question. I'm always going to ask somebody like you. These two here.
Yes, sir.
How do we get, because this to me, I wrote it in my book, this to me is the biggest dilemma facing us as black people. It has always been our dilemma. We haven't figured out how to get past it yet. You got one way, one the other way. It's causing us to split right down the middle. And if we can figure out how to fuse these two minds, if like me and you talking,
that's right.
Our two minds are talking.
That's
How can we take that? Like even with Pastor Bishop, I tell him all the time, me and him together. Here's a former black Muslim, black, and a Christian minister.
That's right.
How do we get that? Because to me, that is the next revolution for us as a people. Sure. Because we don't have that unifying effort, we're just gonna keep losing. Everybody else gonna win.
Du Bois and Booker T. First, I think we got to understand that there's a deliberateness in keeping us apart. The thinking of people keep making us think it's either or. It's either intellect or activism. When in fact it's fusion. Everything I talk about now is fusion, Doc. Because I'm fused. My eyes need my feet. My feet need my eyes. You know, my heart needs my brain. My heart doesn't beat without my brain. My brain can't work without the blood the heart pumps from. So if God made us like that, and the only way we can move as individuals is through fusion, how do we think we're going to be a movement without that? Because, you know, God made it. God got a little sense, you know. God got a little sense, I believe, you know. I'm just saying. He got all wisdom. And it doesn't mean we have to agree on everything. That's the second point. Jesse Helms used to win every year in this state. You know, he was a racist. He would go tell people, I just want to know, do you agree with me 51% of the time? Too often, whether it's progressives or whether it's liberationists or revolutionists, sometimes we make perfection the enemy of great. It's not that we don't have to agree on every tactic, but can we agree on the basic agenda? Can we agree on the basic moral principle? That's why in the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, we're laying out, okay, here it is, systemic racism, systemic poverty, ecological devastation. Here are the areas, and here's what's going on, the empirical and the anecdotal data. Some people say, well, I don't want to get with that. Well, we say, okay, just don't fight us. You know why? If that's not your thing, then you don't have to come out against it. If you don't want to work with preachers and all, that's fine. But do you feel like this agenda? Well, yeah, I think the agenda. Okay, well then let us do it the way we're doing it. You do it the way you're doing it, but let's all fight against it from whatever perspective. The next thing, Doc, is we got the souls of poor folk, the souls of black folk, interestingly enough, the way we do our data. Now, I'm one of these people, I hate to be loud and wrong. I just can't, I'm, Doc, I will study something before I say anything. So, and I'm people out here, no, we want a data-based, metric-based movement. So that when people get in the room, it's not about what you think. You know, you're allowed to think, but it's not just about your personal thinking. It's about thinking that's rooted in facts. So we got a document called The Souls of Poor Folk. Your audience can get it online. It's called The Souls of Poor Folk, Auditing America 50 years after the Poor People's Campaign. And what it does is it gives you anecdotal, that's individuals that are impacted, and empirical data. And we did what you said. We got the scholars and the activists at the same table to write this document. So we had an economist, you know, like William Darity at UNC, bad brother economist, but we also had him in the room with Callie Greer, who's a woman whose daughter died because of the lack of health care from Alabama. And they wrote this document. We had preachers in the room, all different faiths, Jewish, Muslims, Christians. And they wrote this document. It's about 120 pages, easy read, but it's serious stuff. It walks you through the actual numbers. And I dare anybody to read it and not say, two things, I didn't know this, and secondly, we better get together. We even made sure, Doc, with the numbers, you know how normally when they talk about poverty, they say 30% of black people are poor. We say, that's not what we want. We want the raw numbers, down to the ones, because we want to show this. And why we wanted to do that is because oftentimes poverty is racialized. So we wanted to show that, yeah, you might have 66% of African Americans who are poor and low wealth, and you might only have 37% of white people that are poor and low wealth. But when you disaggregate that number, it's 35 million more poor whites than there are poor blacks. And when we get in rooms with the white and black people, Doc, you would be surprised how that helps people come together. Because people start saying, I got this saying, now they're repeating it all over. They say, wait a minute, Reverend Barber, if I'm black and poor and can't pay my light bill, if I'm white, and then a white person, well, if I'm white and poor and can't pay my light bill, and the Latino person, well, if I'm brown and poor and can't pay my light bill, the Asian, I'm white, ain't we all black in the dark? I said, that's it right there. That's it right there.
That's right.
Right. Then we also, but Doc, we went further. We went into the religion. Because that also get,
come on.
And we said, wait a minute, if you go in the Quran, we got some Muslim brothers, it talks about how you treat the poor, how you treat the widow, how you treat the, if you go to the Jewish book, all the prophets talked about were things like woe unto those who legislate evil, rob the poor of their rights, and make women and children their prey. That's Isaiah 10. Isaiah 58, cry loud and spare not. Is this the fast that the Lord requires? No, the fast that the Lord requires is that you pay people what they deserve. You break the band of wickedness. You bring the poor into your house. Only when you do this will your prayers be heard, and you shall be called to repairs and free. And this, and I said, wait a minute, Jesus. I said, let's go here to Jesus. Jesus' first sermon, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me to preach good news to the poor. Patokos is the word in Greek, poor. Those who've been made poor by economic exploitation of Caesars and Herod, the brokenhearted, the blind, the bruised, the oppressed, the prisoner, and all of those made to feel unaccepted. Somebody said, well, maybe that's how he started out preaching. Did he end like that? Okay, let's go to his last sermon. I will judge every nation by when I was hungry, did you feed me? When I was naked, did you clothe me? When I was an undocumented stranger, did you welcome me? So folks started saying, wait a minute. In essence, you're trying to say that all of our religions, regardless of what they are, call us to stand with and for and on the side of those who've been oppressed and beaten themselves. So then somebody said, well, I'm an atheist. We said, okay, well, let's go to the Constitution. Since you're atheist, and go to the Constitution. The Constitution says the first order of business in America is supposed to be we, the people. The second order of business is supposed to be the admittance that we are not a perfect nation. We're striving to be, but we're not. The third order of business is supposed to be the establishment of justice. The fourth order of business is supposed to be to ensure the domestic tranquility. The fifth is supposed to be providing for the common defense. And the sixth is supposed to be to promote the general welfare. And the seventh is you only have a freedom worthy of passing to your future generation if you've done the first six. So the atheists would say, well, I get with that.
All right.
So we said, let's stop fighting.
That's it.
Because while we fighting each other, the system, 400 people in this country make an average of $97,000 an hour. 400 people in this country make an average of $97,000 an hour while we lock people up who want 15 in a unit.
Right.
We don't have time to have total agreement in order to be able to agree on the fundamental 5 diseases, I like to call them, that are impacting our society and the need for us to come together and challenge.
How do we reinfuse our I was in a meeting, a political meeting last week, and I called for right before things, so let's call it pastors.
Mm-hmm.
How can we infuse the church back to where it used to be? I come from a background, I left my father's religion, which is Jehovah's Witness.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I left them for the simple reason, I told him, I said, you're the most powerful organization on the face of the earth, but you won't do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I can't stay here. You won't vote. You won't do nothing. You're so powerful. You knock on my door at 7 o'clock in the morning to wake me up, but you won't do that. I left. That's when we brought ladies back. How do we get this spirit base to start praying, start knocking, start doing some work here? How do we?
When I left my father's religion too, he was a Christian, I walked away for a while because I was just. My father was really big in justice. He read Jesus. He took the red letter seriously. He did not know of a Jesus that was not engaged politically. He did not know of a Jesus that did not care about the least of these and take on the forces that be. The Jesus he knew was crucified as a revolutionary. That's why he was hung on the cross. That's what they did to revolutionaries. Even though he non-violently challenged Caesar, challenged Herod. The Jesus my father taught me was the one that a king would be so angry at him that he would kill babies trying to stop it, right? He's the Jesus that quoted Isaiah and the prophets. who understood sin to be the things we do against each other in the church society. I didn't see it that my father was often beat up for that, and so he would be talking about, doing preschools for our kids and setting up co-ops and challenging injustice, and preachers would get on him and say, you just need to, Robert, stop preaching that stuff and talk about heaven and talk about spirituality. He said, this is spirituality. Mm-hmm. And so when I saw that, Doc, I got upset and I walked away. And he was hurt by it for a while. But he knew I had to go through that. I didn't walk away from God, I walked away from the structure. Now, Doc, I'm not only a local preacher, I'm a consecrated bishop in a college of bishops that is really focused on social justice. So I wanted to own that on this station. And I wanted to own it from this standpoint. Number one, we have to get over the mythology that the church was always anything. That there were slave preachers who supported slavery. There were ministers, the first group of ministers that took on Dr. King in Montgomery were black preachers, right? His own denomination threw him out. They might claim him now, but they threw Dr. King out of the Baptist church, right? He just died. He wrote God of the Oppressed. James Cone said the reason he wrote about black thought theology because he didn't hear it preached in most churches. But then the third thing is there's always been a remnant. There's always been a prophetic voice. When I took prophetic theology in seminary, and by the way, my doctoral degree is in pastoral care and public policy. In other words, you can't really care about people pastorally if you don't get involved in public policy. Let me mention, I think it's one of the biggest sins for me to ask my people to pay tithes, but I'm not going to fight for them to have a living wage.
Go ahead.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying?
Hypocritical.
Yeah. Well, come on, brother. Come on, sister. But and I got scripture, to clearly prove that. Jesus said in Matthew 23:23, you tithe the mint and the cumin and you should have done those things, but you left undone the weightier matters of the law, which is justice and faith and mercy. It's right there. Jesus said that. But anyway, when I studied the prophets, one of the professors reminded us one day that the prophets only came to the fore in ancient Israel when the churches and when the priests weren't doing their jobs. So the prophets were always seen as the remnant, right? They didn't just jump up, they jumped up when the kings and the preachers were not doing the right thing. So for instance, in Ezekiel 22 says, your priests have violated my law. Your politicians have become like wolves, devouring the people, hurting the poor, the women, and the strangers. But what is worse, your preachers support them, and your preachers undergird them. Then Ezekiel at the end says, God says, Ezekiel, I need to know, can I find somebody to stand in the gap so that I won't destroy the nation? Prophetic ministry is standing in the gap, right? Jesus preached his first sermon, Luke 4, and almost got hung. People forget that when he said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, preach good news to the poor. Keep reading. Around about verse 26, they try to hang him in his own hometown, Nazareth, which was poor, because even the poor people there had become so intoxicated with this false brand of religion that they didn't even know anymore prophetic preaching when they heard it. So Jesus was trying to help them, and they tried to kill him. My point is, we have to recognize we're not going to ever get everybody, but we need the remnant of people to stand up. And we're trying to follow that model. In Amos 5, I know you don't want a Bible study, but it's coming out of me now.
Come on.
In Amos chapter 5, the Bible says, it says there's robbery in the courts, the poor are being hurt, the stranger are being hurt, and Amos says, God says, I need a remnant of people who will cry in the street. He doesn't say I need everybody. He says I need a remnant of people who will cry in the street. And if I get a remnant of people who will cry in the street, he says, then I will assist you in this fight for justice. And then the next verse talks about let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. It's all tied up in there together. So my point is, Doc, we have to have this remnant of people who are willing to come together. And I believe that there are more out there that want to. That's one of the reasons with this Poor People's Campaign, we're creating documents that preachers and churches can use for Sunday school and use for Bible study. So because people die for lack of knowledge. I will tell you, Doc, in the last year, and even here in North Carolina, I've sat in rooms with rabbis and imams and Christian pastors, Unitarians, Episcopalians, Presbyterians, who are all coming together. Not everybody, but that remnant. Right? That's saying we can no longer be silent, and we certainly, lastly, Doc, cannot sit on the sidelines when we got this strange, what I call theological malpractice that borderlines on heresy, that literally goes in and prays, P-R-A-Y, for a president, while that president is praying, P-R-E-Y-I-N-G, on the very people that God says we're supposed to be concerned about.
That hurt a lot of us.
Huh?
We weren't hurt supposed to that one.
Yes, sir.
I mean, to go in there
and try to consecrate it.
Right.
Because, but remember, Moses had his court chapters.
A couple of those I liked.
Huh?
A couple of those I liked.
Well,
they were. I studied a couple of those.
Sure.
I liked them.
Sure. But Doc, if you can get out here and not know, and again, I'm not saying. Let me be quiet. A group of us invited Trump to meet with us, but we wasn't gonna meet in the tower.
Hit your house.
We gonna meet in the church, and we were gonna talk to him about. We were gonna challenge him and call him to repentance. Send him a certified letter. He wouldn't meet with us.
No.
But the worst thing you can have, any leader, king, doesn't need a chaplain, a puppet. You always need what David had, a Nathan. David, he had a prophet named Nathan.
Check him.
Yes, sir.
Nathan checked him.
Nathan, and he said, David, I love you. David, you killed Goliath. David, you've been good for us, but you done killed this woman's husband.
Mm-hmm.
Thou art the man. And thank God for that, because David didn't kill the prophet. He repented.
Yeah.
The last thing you need is somebody going in when a president or a congressperson. Just yesterday, a couple of things that almost made my stomach turn is when Jeff Sessions, for instance, said that we were supposed to support the government no matter what, and that God would be on the side of what they were doing with snatching children away because you're supposed to obey the law, and tried to quote Paul. Paul went to jail for challenging the government. I mean, it's just, yesterday in St. Louis, 2 days ago, there was a billboard up. It says, the word become flesh, and had a picture of Donald Trump. The word become, I'm saying, and then Bobby Bowden in Florida just 2 days ago said, he was on stage saying, God plus Trump is a majority. Man, that we got to challenge that, but we also have to challenge this kind of apolitical, stuff that, hey, this apolitical stuff that just says, look, it'll be all right in heaven. I agree. We don't have to worry about the new heaven. We got to worry about a New York and a new North Carolina, and as a new shoe, as a new clothes, as a food down here. Yeah, I'm clear on that.
We appreciate you coming by. I know you got to get out here. You got some other stuff.
Well,
give us a word because I'm worried about. I'm telling you, I'm honest. I said it yesterday on my show. I'm worried about tomorrow. I got to say this again because I don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
We don't know what the outcome would be, and I don't want us panicking.
Oh, no. We cannot panic. We cannot say this is the worst we've ever faced because we come from a people that made it through slavery, made it through Jim Crow. This is the latest rendition, and it's not even as bad as it was then. Now, when people around say this is the age of Donald Trump, I say, are you nuts? God, this is the age of God.
Come on.
Right.
See, that's the part we forgetting. He still exists.
Yeah. And this is just our time. We said, Lord have mercy. Well, what do you think people did before you? They stood up. It's just our time. Rosa Parks not getting up out of the grave. Martin King not getting up out of the grave. None of those people are getting up. I think I hear a little playback. Yeah, nobody's getting up out of the grave. But we're their children. We are their children. That's who we are. And so it's our time to take up the mantle. You know, I said to somebody, listen, you don't honor martyrs by having celebration. You know, the only way you honor a martyr is you go to the place where they were shot. You reach down in the blood, or killed, reach down in the blood, pick up the baton, and carry it the next mile of the way. So as I call, now I got this sister here. She's been listening. Now I really should have stopped and let her talk, but she wanted to come today. I asked her if she, you know, because our people move by song.
Right.
This morning, this sister's mama, 90 years old, went to her precinct. They told her she was at the wrong precinct. Her mama started singing, "Ain't nobody gonna turn me around." Look, in the place, walked out the place, 90 years old with her cane, got in the car, said, "Baby, we going where we got to go. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around." Yara Allen is singing all over the country. She's the musicologist for the movement. I want her to close out with something in her own way, a word and some form of a song.
Thank you so much. We're the movement that votes together, and we also have to be the movement that sings together. We can't allow those songs that my mother and my grandmother sang to fall by the wayside. So we have to start singing together again and being conscious about what kind of music we lift. We have to be aware of the kind of music that we sing. And so in this movement, what we do is we reach back and we get a lot of those songs that are traditionally in the church, and we tweak them just a little bit, and we apply them to the movement. Okay. And we make them so that everybody can sing those songs. We talked about fusion, and so we make those songs so that everybody can sing them. One of those songs is "Pray On Just a Little While Longer." And normally we would sing "Everything Is Gonna Be All Right." So in this movement, we sing, "Pray on just a little while longer. I know justice is coming soon." But we don't stop there. We don't just leave it at praying on just a little while longer. We also admonish people through song to fight on a little while longer, to vote on a little while longer. And so I'll just give you just a piece of that song. And everybody's in here if you want to sing along.
No, we ain't gonna mess with you. Don't get fooled into that, Doc. You get hurt.
Don't get me.
No, you sounded like something.
You're gonna set me up.
Pray on just a little while longer. Pray on just a little while longer. Oh, pray on just a little while longer. I know justice is coming soon. You got to fight on just a little while longer. Fight on just a little while longer. Oh, fight on just a little while longer. I know justice is coming soon. Go out and vote on just a little while longer. Vote on, oh, a little while longer. Oh, vote on just a little while longer. Oh, I know justice is coming soon.
Brothers and sisters, I want you to get out there and build this movement. Yes, we vote today, we move tomorrow. We're electing district attorneys, we're electing judges, every member of the state legislature, every member of the United States House of Representatives, sheriffs. It is time for them to hear your voice. In Hebrew, The word for voice is koil, K-O-L. The same word in Hebrew is the word for vote, K-O-L, which means your voice is your vote vote is your voice, and your voice is your vote. But also koil sometimes means an action that takes place that sounds like thunder, that it is so powerful that it sounds like thunder. Oftentimes the voice of God sounds like thunder, koil. And so what human beings want, people of faith want, is we want to do those things and say those things that sound like that are in line with God, so that what we do, what we say, our actions are like thunder. It's time for us to thunder against racism. It's time for us to thunder against voter suppression. It's time for us to thunder against those who would stop us from having health care and having living wages. It's time for us to thunder against those who would sit in high places and then take from the people. And that thunder begins today by exercising your right to vote. If you already have, get 10 other people. Let a sound come out of North Carolina that we're going to fight on, pray on, and vote on, because we believe that justice is coming, but it will not come unless we do our part and raise our voices and our votes.
Thank you, Reverend Barber. You've been listening to 104.9 FM, 1490 AM, making an impact. Thanks everyone for listening today. We'll be back on No Covers Tomorrow again at 12:30. Have a good day. Get out and vote. Get out and vote. Get out and vote. Peace and blessings. Thanks everyone.
Lord mercy. Y'all work a man good around here.
Pretty good.
God. I thought I'd come down here and do 5 seconds.
5 seconds.
Yeah. Bishop, you all right?
Yes, sir. I'm fine.
Bishop, you were working that stuff. You know all about that, huh?
No, it's working me.
Oh, it's working you. How you doing?
Sir.
Bless you, man. How far does your FM reach? I need.
We reach all the way to Holly Ridge, going north, and then Jacksonville. I mean,
It's a copy of my third one.
Okay.
but we are streaming. We're streaming.
I need to about getting my church stuff on.
Well, yeah, but I told you that we would do that.
Yeah, I just need to get a something sent to my down the business side of it. You know, my people. I do at least once a month.
Well,
Oh, okay.
Bishop.
To do.
Yeah, go ahead and cut the recording off. Hit stop on the red
Let me
button.
let you do. I'm gonna start that till you finish up.
You said, yeah, just
Hey, man.
let me get that.
Yeah, we ain't on.
Yeah.
Thank you for what you do here, brother. Thank you for what you do.
Oh, thank you.
This is super important.
Thank you.
I'm gonna keep school dog. I sure am. But don't give me a book that I read.
Thank you.
The two most important constitutional amendments to me are the First Amendment, the right to freedom of religion, freedom of protest, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and the 14th Amendment, equal protection. The important constitutional amendments to me are the First Amendment, the right to freedom of religion, freedom of protest, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and the 14th Amendment, equal protection. The important constitutional amendments to me are the First Amendment,